This is your end!
No! Please!
The car was still moving when he opened the door and pushed me out. I hit the tarmac with my left shoulder first. The sound, I will never forget that sound. Not the scream of the tires, not the horns of the other cars, not even the way people started shouting in Yoruba and broken English from the roadside. The sound I will never forget is the silence that came after. The moment when everything went still and I was lying on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway, blood on my palm, sand in my mouth, my white lace blouse torn at the sleeve, the blouse I had ironed that morning with so much care because I wanted to look presentable for his mother. His mother, that woman, I should have known. I should have listened when my own mother sat me down in her small parlor in Abeokuta, her wrapper tied high on her chest, her eyes carrying a kind of knowing that only women who have suffered can carry, and said to me, "Gina, that family is not for you." But I was 26, I was in love, and I was 3 months pregnant. My name is Gina Mensah, and this is the story of how I lost everything in one afternoon, and how God, in His own time, gave it all back with interest. Let me take you back to where it started. Not the expressway, not the car. It started 6 months earlier, on the day I walked into the Harrington family compound for the first time and felt in my chest not excitement, not joy, but a quiet, cold warning that I was too foolish to obey. Barry Harrington was the kind of man that made a poor girl forget her sense. He was tall in the way that makes a room feel smaller when he walks in. He had that deep voice, that calm confidence, and those hands, big, steady hands that held mine like I was something precious, like I mattered. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Accra with my mother, my younger brother Kofi, and a ceiling fan that only worked on its lowest speed. We were not poor in the way that people starve. We were poor in the way that you learn to be grateful for just enough. I went to a government school. I sold chin-chin on weekends to pay for my own lesson notes. I knew what it meant to want things and swallow that wanting quietly, because wanting loudly changes nothing when there is no money. So when Barry Harrington found me, really found me, looked at me like I was worth finding, something in me that had been folded up for a long time began to open. He came into the shop where I worked, a small fabric boutique on the high street. He was buying material for his sister's birthday. He asked my opinion. I gave it honestly. He laughed. He came back the next day. And the day after that. Within 3 months, he was calling me his woman. Within 5 months, he was talking about marriage. I was happy. Lord help me, I was so happy. I did not yet know about Sophia. Sophia Harrington did not like me from the first second her eyes landed on my face. I remember the day clearly. Barry had driven me to their family home in the estate. Big compound, black gate, 2 cars in the driveway, a house that announced money without shouting it. I wore my best dress, a deep green wrap dress that my friend Rita said made me look elegant. I had rehearsed what to say. I had prayed that morning. I was ready. I was not ready. Sophia opened the door before Barry even knocked. She stood there in a cream bubu, gold earrings, reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she looked at me the way a woman looks at a market stall that is selling something she did not come to buy. "So, this is her," she said. Not hello, not welcome, just "so, this is her." Barry smiled, squeezed my hand. "Mom, this is Gina. I told you about her." "You told me many things," Sophia said, and stepped aside to let us in. The parlor was cold from the air conditioning and decorated with the kind of furniture that is meant to impress visitors. Framed family photos on the wall, a large portrait of Barry's late father in full traditional attire. Everything in that house said, "We are somebody." And everything about the way Sophia looked at me said, "And you are not."
We sat. She brought out a tray of drinks that a house girl carried in, and she sat across from me, legs crossed, eyes steady, and began what I can only describe as an interview disguised as conversation. Where did you say your father works? He passed away, ma, when I was 12. A pause. And your mother? She sells provisions in Medina Market. Another pause, longer this time, the kind of pause that is doing a lot of work. And you, what do you do again? I work at a fabric boutique, ma, but I'm also studying part-time for my degree in fabric boutique, she smiled, but her eyes did not. How lovely. I felt Barry's hand tighten on my knee under the table, a warning or maybe an apology. I was not sure which. That visit lasted 1 hour. Sophia talked mostly to Barry. She asked me 2 more questions, both of which were really just one question dressed in different clothes. Why are you here? And why do you think you are enough for my son? When we got back into the car, I stared out of the window and said nothing for a long time. Barry said, she just needs time. I wanted to believe him. But Sophia Harrington was not a woman who needed time. She was a woman who had already decided. And women like that, women with money and a cold kind of pride, do not change their minds. They simply wait for the right moment to act. 3 months later, I discovered I was pregnant. I told Barry on a Tuesday evening, sitting on the edge of his bed, my hands shaking as I held the test. He stared at it. He was quiet for too long. Then he said, we'll figure it out. Not, I'm happy, not, this is good news, just, we'll figure it out. Like I was a problem, like the baby growing inside me was an equation he had not budgeted for. I told myself it was shock. I told myself he needed time. What I did not know, what I had no way of knowing, was that the same afternoon I found out about the pregnancy, Barry was sitting in his mother's parlor and Sophia was sliding a photograph across the coffee table toward him, a photograph of a woman. Her name was Dora. Her father owned 3 filling stations and a logistics company. She had studied abroad. She wore her hair natural and her smile like a trophy. And according to Sophia Harrington, she was everything I was not. I found all of this out later, much later. First, I had to survive the road.
If you have ever loved someone and caught them lying to your face, you know the exact feeling I am talking about. It is not anger, not at first. It is something quieter and more devastating than anger. It is the moment your body understands something that your heart has not yet accepted. Like a light switching off in a room you thought was safe. I started noticing the signs in small ways. Barry began coming home late and offering explanations before I even asked for them. That is always how you know, when someone starts explaining things you haven't yet questioned. He started taking calls in the bathroom. He started being extra kind to me in a way that felt like guilt wearing a good shirt. I asked him once, directly, is there someone else? He looked me in the eye. He took my hand. He said, Gina, how can you ask me that? You are carrying my child. I believed him. God forgive me, I believed him. It was my friend Rita who told me the truth. Rita, who worked at a salon near the estate, who heard things because women in salons always hear things. She called me on a Thursday afternoon, her voice low and careful. Gina, I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but you are my person, so I have to. She told me about Dora. She told me that Sophia had been organizing meetings between Barry and Dora for weeks. She told me that there was already talk in certain circles about a wedding, not my wedding, Dora's wedding, to my Barry, to the father of the child in my womb. I sat on the kitchen floor after that call, just sat there. The tiles were cold under me. The tap was dripping. Somewhere outside, a car alarm was going off and nobody was dealing with it. And I sat there and I felt my whole world rearrange itself into something I did not recognize. By the time Barry came home that evening, I had cried myself dry. There were no more tears, just a terrible glassy calm. I asked him again. I told him what I knew. He did not deny it this time.
What he said instead was worse than any lie. He sat down across from me, rubbed his face with both hands, and said, "Gina, you have to understand my position." My position. As if I was a business negotiation, as if the baby inside me was a line item on a budget sheet. "My mother," he started. "Your mother," I repeated. "She's not going to accept this. You and I both know that. Dora's family and ours have been connected for years. This was always—" "Say it," I said. My voice was very quiet. "Say what you are trying to say, Barry. Don't dress it up. Just say it." He could not look at me. "Was I ever real to you, or was I just something to do while you waited for the real plan?" He said nothing, and his silence was the loudest answer I had ever received in my life. I stood up. I told him I was going to my mother. I picked up my bag. He stood up too, suddenly, and said, "We need to talk about this properly. Get in the car. I'll drive you and we can talk on the way." I should not have gotten in that car. I should have walked out of that gate and never looked back. But I was tired. I was broken. I was 3 months pregnant, and the father of my child was sitting there asking me to just talk. And some stupid, faithful, hopeful part of me still thought that talking could fix this. So I got in the car. And that is how I ended up on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, bleeding on the tarmac, watching his tail lights disappear into the traffic. If this story is already hitting you somewhere deep, stay with me, because what happens next changed everything. Subscribe so you don't miss the rest. This story is just getting started.
Let me tell you what nobody tells you about surviving something like that. They always talk about the miracle, the fact that you lived, the fact that the car swerved, that you did not die, that God was watching. And yes, God was watching. But nobody tells you about the part after the miracle. The part where you are lying in a hospital bed in a gown that is not yours, and the nurse is cleaning gravel out of your palm, and you are not crying because you have already cried everything out, and what is left is something that does not even have a name. A woman named Mrs. Ajay found me on the road. She was a retired headmistress, 58 years old, driving a modest Toyota that she had owned for 11 years. She told me later that she almost did not stop, that she nearly convinced herself it was not her business, but something made her stop. She said, "I felt like someone told me to." She pulled over, she came to me, she said, oh my God, not in a dramatic way, but in a way of a woman who is already doing what needs to be done while the words are still coming out of her mouth. She got me up, she got me to her car, she drove me to the nearest hospital. The doctors confirmed that I was bruised, that my shoulder was sprained, that there were lacerations on my palms and left knee. They also confirmed after examination that the baby was still there, still holding on, still alive. I cried when they told me that, not out of happiness alone, though I was grateful down to my bones. I cried because that small unborn person had survived something that would have broken most adults. And in that moment, lying in that hospital bed, I made a decision. I was going to survive this too. My mother came. They called her from my phone, which somehow had not shattered when I fell. She walked into that ward, and when she saw me, bandaged, swollen-faced, lying under a hospital sheet, she did not say, "I told you so." She is not that kind of woman. She just sat beside me, took my unbandaged hand in both of hers, and held it. She held it the way you hold something you almost lost. She stayed the whole night. In the morning, she asked me only one question. "What do you want to do?" I told her I wanted to disappear for a while. I wanted to go somewhere Barry could not find me, somewhere Sophia could not reach me, and I wanted to have my baby in peace and figure out what came next. My mother nodded. She knew people in Kumasi. Her cousin had a small house. There was a clinic nearby. It was quiet. It was safe. "Then that is where we go," she said. We left 3 days later. I did not tell Barry. I did not tell his family. I blocked every number connected to the Harrington household, and I left Lagos like a woman who was done with a chapter. Not defeated, but done. There is a difference between those two things. Defeat is when they break you. Done is when you decide that this particular war is not worth your blood anymore, and you walk away to fight a different one that is actually worth winning. What I did not know
What I could not have known as I sat in that bus to Kumasi with my mother's hand in mine and my unborn child moving for the first time, a tiny flutter like a question mark in my belly, was that while I was disappearing, the Harrington world was beginning to crack from the inside. Sophia Harrington, the woman who looked at me like I was nothing, was about to find out that the thing she had protected so carefully, her reputation, her son, her perfect family image, was already rotting underneath her, and the rot had a name. The rot was Barry.
7 months later, I gave birth to a boy. I named him Samuel. It means God has had. I chose it because during those long months in Kumasi, when the nights were hard and the loneliness was a physical weight on my chest, I prayed with the kind of desperation that strips away all the nice language and leaves you with just the raw, honest truth of what you need. And I felt, in a way I cannot fully explain, that I was being heard. Samuel came into the world at 4:47 in the morning, screaming like he had opinions already, with a full head of dark hair and his father's jawline, which I decided I was going to forgive him for. He was perfect. He was mine. And the moment they placed him on my chest, something in me that had been broken since that road, since even before that road, began quietly to repair itself. I found a small job in Kumasi. I used the time to finish my degree online. My mother visited every month. Mrs. Ajay, the woman who had found me on the road, became something close to a second mother. She drove 4 hours to see Samuel when he was born. She brought him a blue blanket and a card that said, "Welcome to a world that is better because you are in it." I kept that card. Back in Lagos, things were falling apart for the Harringtons in the way that things fall apart when they are built on dishonesty. Slowly at first, and then all at once. It was Rita who kept me informed because Rita cannot help herself, and I love her for it. First, Dora's family had pulled out of the proposed marriage arrangement. Word was that Dora herself had called it off after finding out about me, not because she was heartbroken over Barry, but because she was a woman of self-respect and she refused to begin a marriage built on the erasure of another woman and a child. When her father confirmed what Barry had done, that there was a pregnant woman he had abandoned on the roadside, literally thrown out of a moving vehicle, Dora's father told Barry that his family wanted nothing further to do with them. Sophia Harrington, the woman who sacrificed me on the altar of her ambitions for her son, discovered what it felt like to be ignored by him, to be overruled, to sit in her big parlor with her gold earrings and her framed photos and realized that the son she had controlled and weaponized was now doing to her exactly what she had taught him to do to women who no longer served his purpose. The irony was not lost on anyone who knew the full story. But the real moment, the moment that closed the circle, had not yet happened. That came on a Sunday morning, 14 months after Barry pushed me out of that car. I had come back to Lagos, not for Barry, not for the Harringtons. I came back because my mother's health had needed attention and the specialist was in Lagos, and because Samuel was now over a year old and strong and loud and full of joy, and I had decided that I was not going to spend my life hiding in Kumasi from people who were not worth hiding from. I had a job, a real one. A fashion company had seen some designs I posted online during the quiet months in Kumasi, and they had reached out. I was doing well. Not rich, but standing on ground that was mine, that nobody had handed me, that nobody could take from me the way you can take things you give. I was in church that Sunday, my mother's church in Accra. She had wanted us to attend service together, and I had driven up for the weekend. It was a big congregation, the kind where you do not always notice everyone around you. I noticed Sophia Harrington. She was sitting 3 rows ahead of me, same gold earrings, same stiff back. But something was different.
She was thinner. Her face had the look of a woman who had been arguing with something inside herself for a long time and was losing. She had not seen me. The sermon that morning was about sowing and reaping, the kind of sermon that makes some people shift in their seats. The pastor, a plain-spoken man who had never met a difficult truth he was afraid of, said, "Some of us have sown cruelty and wrapped it in the name of standards. We have destroyed people and called it protecting our family. And we are sitting here today wondering why the harvest is painful. But you cannot sow thorns and expect to gather roses." I watched Sophia's back go rigid. After service, it happened the way things happen in real life. Not dramatically, not with a crowd gathered and a spotlight, just two women in the church foyer and a baby on my hip, and a moment that could not be avoided. She turned and saw me. I watched her face go through many things in the space of about 3 seconds. Shock, recognition, something that might, in a different woman, have been shame. I did not approach her with anger. I had carried that anger for 14 months, and I had put it down somewhere in Kumasi in the middle of a sleepless night because I realized it was the only thing still connecting me to her, and I did not want to be connected to her anymore. I walked up to her calmly, Samuel on my hip, and I said, "Good morning, Sophia." She opened her mouth, closed it. I said, "This is Samuel. He is 14 months old. He is healthy and happy and loved. I want you to see him. Not for Barry, not for you. Just so that you know what you try to bury is alive and well." She looked at Samuel. Something moved across her face that I think was the closest she had come to genuine pain in a long time. Because Samuel, God forgive him for it, had Barry's jaw, Barry's eyes, and the unmistakable stamp of the Harrington bloodline in his face. There was no denying what she was looking at. Her lips pressed together. Her eyes went bright with something she was clearly fighting. And then, this is the part I did not expect, she said, very quietly, "I'm sorry." Just that. No explanation, no justification, no, "but you must understand my position." Just the two smallest, most expensive words a proud woman like Sophia Harrington had probably ever spent. I looked at her for a long moment, and I said, "I forgive you. Not for your sake, for mine." Then I turned and walked out into the Sunday morning, into the sunlight, with my son on my hip and my mother beside me, and my feet steady on the ground. Behind me, I heard Sophia Harrington begin to cry, right there in the foyer, in her gold earrings, in front of whoever was watching. The kind of crying that is not embarrassment, but reckoning. I did not go back. I did not need to. Justice does not always come the way we imagine it, loud and public and dramatic like a scene from a film. Sometimes it comes quietly on a Sunday morning in a church foyer. Sometimes it looks like a woman walking away whole from the people who tried to destroy her. Sometimes it is simply this: I survived, I thrived, and you have to live with what you did. I once lay on a tarmac road with blood on my hands and sand in my mouth, and I thought it was the end of my story. It was only the end of their chapter in it. My name is Gina Mensah. I was thrown out of a moving car. I was abandoned, humiliated, and erased. And I lived to tell the story. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe. We share new stories every week.